Aslam Mayat is your host. I am an Exco member of AMAL, Association of Muslim Accountants and Lawyers. Yeah. Our next topic is the Judicial Service Commission disappointment, appointment of judges. Attorney Fozia Madhi, judges are appointed by the President on the recommendation of the JSC. Can you take us through the process of electing judges and broadly the composition of the JSC, which sits on the hearings which we see on TV as if it's some kind of soapbox?
Assalamu alaikum, Aslam and listeners. Thank you. So, Aslam, the Judicial Services Commission is a creature of the Constitution, and the composition of the Judicial Services Commission is in terms of the Constitution. So it consists of the Chief Justice, in his absence, the Deputy Chief Justice, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, the Judge President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, another Judge President, attorneys and advocates recognized by the Legal Practice Council and the Bar. It consists of 6 members from the National Assembly. It consists of 4 people, or 6 people, I think, who are non-legal people, but nominated by the President, and it includes the National Provincial Council members. So that's the constitution of the Joint Judicial Services Commission.
So, Fozia, just to think, broadly speaking, you've got politicians.
Correct.
Politicians, there's quite a few ANCs, heavyweight, a lot of ANC members there.
Correct.
But it's also got minority parties as well. So all the political parties are represented.
Yes, that's correct.
In a greater or lesser extent.
Correct.
And then you've got representatives of the legal profession, both the attorneys and the advocates.
Correct.
And I think that the black advocates or transformation advocates.
Yes, correct.
And then you've got the government, the ministers and the Minister of Justice and so on. So that's basically the composition.
Yes.
Broad-based to give South Africa a huge say in the whole matter.
Correct. It's quite a wide and diverse representation. I've omitted to mention you also have an academic professor. So also it's represented legally from the legal profession, as you said, the attorneys and advocates. It's widely represented by government, that's correct. And in representing government, obviously the political parties will be represented there. And as you correctly said, as we are aware that the dominant party is the ANC, so the ANC will be well represented there, but it's a cross-section, so correct. It's a cross-section of government. It's a cross-section of the legal profession, the attorney's profession, the advocate's profession, the academic legal profession, and then very importantly, the president himself has appointed members of the community. So it has community representation, but these are elected by the president as well, so that's covered as well. So it's quite a broad and diverse group of people that constitute the Judicial Services Commission. That's correct. So they follow two. They have 2 functions. They deal with complaints that they receive, and the second aspect that they deal with, which is a very important aspect and which has recently been in the media and the public, is the appointment of judges. And more recently, they've gotten a lot of media coverage for the appointment of the Chief Justice. So that's the most recent thing that they've been busy involved with, was the appointment of the Chief Justice. And because the President created quite a public process for it.
Just to stop you there, Fozia, I wanted to ask you a question about that. The initial JSC hearing chaired by Mogoeng was challenged, and in terms of court settlement had to be reheld. This was covered in the media. What was the legal objection, and what, in your opinion, on the initial interviews against Daya Pillay and the 2 white male applicants?
Yes, that's correct. So one of the things that the Judicial Service Commission was involved in, as you correctly identified, Sabriyah, was in terms of appointing a judge for the Constitutional Court. At that point in time, the Chief Justice was Mogoeng, and he played a critical role in this process. the body CASEC then what they did is they then objected to the process, took it to a court process, and when both parties represented their views, there was a settlement that said that the process must be started again. And what CASEC was raising, and what the public had seen in this process, was that the way the interview was conducted was sort of, it bordered in, it was not fair. It was not tied only to merit and capability of the candidate, but it sort of degenerated into personal kind of matters concerning the applicants, and also into relationships. For example, Daya Pillay was questioned about her possible relationship with Hanekom and Praveen Gordon. There were 2 white male applicants, and there was a lot of focus on their race, etc. So what we saw is that a process that was supposed to aim to fulfill a very important position, like the head of the Constitutional Court, degenerated into a very personable kind of unfair process where personal questions were raised about the applicant which had no relevance on their credibility, on their ability to perform. So I think what the public picked up, and then CASEC then saw what was going on, and then they took them to court, and by settlement they were then it was decided that the process must be started afresh.
Sorry, I have a question for both Aslam and Fozia, the attorneys here. So in my opinion, I think that the people who are supposed to represent the JSC, you have legal representatives, people elected from the public. I don't have any issues with the makeup, but in your assessment, do you think that once those people are chosen and then they step over bound, that the JSC doesn't call them into question? For example, some of the questions that were asked, especially when Darlene Purfo was questioning Judge Meyer, seemed to have very sexist undertones, and this is not the first time that the JSC members have asked questions that are not related to what they're supposed to ask. So do you think that this is the case within the JSC?
Thank you for that question, Aqeel. It's a very relevant question. I think what we're advocating for, and the problem with the JSC and the process and the way it's handled, is that currently it lacks a code of conduct. It clearly lacks direction in terms of what is acceptable questions to be raised at these forums, the manner in which the questioning should apply, and the outcome it hopes to achieve. So I think the process of these 2 processes, where the Judicial Service Commission was involved in the appointment of the head of the Constitutional Court, and more recently in the Chief Justice, highlighted the need for a code of conduct for members of the Judicial Services Commission, and then the code of conduct would then embrace not just acceptable behavior by the committee members of the Judicial Services Commission, but will also address issues like, if these committee members behave unacceptably, what can and cannot be done to ensure that their behavior is called into account, because every single person, including Judicial Service Committee members, should be held account to a certain standard, and if that standard is breached, there should be consequences for that. So I think there's been very much a public call for that. For example, the Active Citizens Movement has called for a code of conduct in respect of the Judicial Services Commission members. It's also been broader than that. The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation has requested the same. The Human Rights Lawyers Commission has requested the same. CASEC has also requested the same. The Nelson Mandela Foundation has said the same. So there's been quite a comprehensive call, and quite a wide call by the public and by civic organizations and many organizations to request that the behavior of the Judicial Services Commission was unacceptable, and that the way to deal with this issue or problem in the future is to have a code of conduct for members of the Judicial Services Commission, and that would also address when the lines are crossed and their behavior of members is unacceptable.
Yeah, look, I think generally there is the perception that things are not right. The very fact that CASEC went to court and the JSC came to a settlement was an acknowledgement that the first hearing was not held properly. There is no code of conduct. Nevertheless, there are certain rules that they've applied, like if you're going to put controversial or personal or matters which are not directly related to law, you need to give them the applicant advance notice of that question. And this has not been adhered to, and there have been people being ambushed with questions, very personal questions. If you take the latest one, where one of the judges, they put there was unsubstantiated allegations of sexual misconduct. Now, in my view, such an accusation is serious and should be put to an applicant, because if it turns up later, it can be hugely embarrassing. But there was no prior warning given of this, which should have been. And I think a lot of the problem lies with the application, with the inability of the chairpersons, both in the first hearing, Mogoeng, and in the second hearing, Petsa, to exercise proper control. After the sexual allegations were debated at length, suddenly Petsa says, oh, by the way, I'm expunging all that from the record. I mean, it's absurd. The damage has already been done. There clearly rules need to be done. Fozia mentioned the active citizens movement. I think their petition that they raised has got 7,000 people who've subscribed to that petition. So clearly there's a need for a proper code of conduct, but not only a proper code of conduct, for the application of that conduct. And a chairperson who can exercise control, and if people breach that, then there need to be consequences, because otherwise they'll just carry on using that. I mean, if you take the question of Malema, raised a question, one of the judges had given a judgment against, I think it was in there was some defamation case by Trevor Manuel, and that judge gave a decision against the EFF. And Malema then attacked him on that particular judgment. Now, they're making this a political thing. They're using and abusing the JSC to bring in now a judge in the future would be scared to give a judgment, because he knows he's not going to get appointed as a judge, because all these politicians who lost the case, hounding them and trying to discredit them and bring up all sorts of things and hijack them, and that really is the problem. Judge Daya Pillay withdrew from the second round because of the way she was treated, so yes, this type of behavior would dissuade judges who are eminently capable from applying, and that shouldn't be the case. If that's an answer to your question, Aqeel. Fozia, whilst transformation is a constitutional imperative, some argue that it is overemphasized, resulting in a loss of exemplary white male candidates, because that's the one group that's most, from a transformation point of view, fall lowest down in the rung. With regard to Unterhalter, in my view, he was correctly not chosen. It cannot be right, notwithstanding what Kasek has to say about it, and I think they handled it very badly. It cannot be right to be an Exco member of a body that aggressively and litigiously supports decades of denial of basic human rights to Palestinians, which the Judicial Code of Conduct, read with the Bangalore Principles, every judge swears to uphold. Simply saying that, I may have been wrong, simply does not cut it. Tell us, do you or do you not subscribe for equal human rights for Palestinians? And that should be the questions that should be posed, and not hide and say, it's politically sensitive, which Mogoeng jumps in and tries to protect people from.
Thank you, Aslam. Aslam, the legal profession, and judges in particular, have a responsibility to ensure that justice prevails and human rights are upheld in any circumstances. And to do that, they have to subscribe to standards where they accept that human rights is the standard and any abuse or wrongdoing of human rights is wrong. So, for example, the Palestinian situation is it's apartheid. It's like how apartheid South Africa was. It's totally wrong. There's major human rights abuses taking place there. Violation of rights, the killing of innocent children and civilians, etc. So if you subscribe and wish to hold a position as great as a judge or a chief justice, your thinking in terms of human rights has to be very clear and very strong and very ethical. And you have to, as a chief justice, subscribe to upholding and adhering the law and human rights under all circumstances. So yes, Unterhalter subscribing to Israel and condoning the perpetuating of the wrongdoing by Israel against Palestinian civilians is very concerning. So that was the one question you raised.
Yeah, but I'm not sure whether he said he condones it and so on, but the very fact that you're on a body which aggressively supports it and without you saying anything about it, I think is problematic.
Yes, I agree. Yes, I think we have to be careful because we mustn't cast an aspersion on an individual. That's not correct. So thank you for that, Aslam. But there's a second aspect you raised, and I'd like to deal with that. And the second aspect is, while transformation is a constitutional imperative, some argue that it's overemphasized, resulting in the loss of exemplary white male candidates. South Africa, having been through apartheid, it's understandable that we want to rectify and undo the wrongs of apartheid. And a large role of that is to ensure that the previously disadvantaged African population is represented and is South Africa does transform to give them a greater, equal if not greater opportunity to thrive in employment in all aspects. So while I completely support that, but I think that what we do in most cases, and it happened also similarly in the Chief Justice, we sometimes go from one extreme to another. So yes, while we're duty bound to undo the ravages of apartheid, and we're duty bound to implement policies that uplift previously disadvantaged people, in the practical application of that, sometimes there is no balance in that we then forego merit and ethics just to transform a particular sector. So I think that we've maybe taken it too far. I think we must continue to transform South Africa and undo the wrongs of the past. But at the same time, we have to ensure that when we appoint people, they have to have merit. They have to be capable. Because remember, we do require skills in South Africa to transform us and take us forward and uplift us. So we have to couple it with skills, and we have to ensure the ethics are also sound. So when we employ individuals in senior positions like the chief, we have to ensure that those people are free of any kind of wrongdoing, corruption, etc., and their values and principles are of the highest standing. And sometimes, yes, if that particular candidate happens to be a white candidate, we have to not exclude them purely on their race. We have to find that balance between transformation and skills and doing the right thing as well. Thank
absolutely. You. I think you're quite correct. I think the courts have actually ruled that. I think one of the right-wing organizations went to court, and the court said, yes, you can't simply exclude somebody just because they're white. You've got to look at the basket of values, integrity, ethics, honesty, courage. Is another one, and then come to a decision, and then obviously transformation is an imperative as well. Having filled the Concord vacancies, the Chief Justice is appointed by the President after consultation with the JSC and leaders of the political parties in the House of Assembly. Ramaphosa invented his transparent process. Now, after public input, the nominations panel, chaired by International Criminal Court Judge Navi Pillay, nominated 8, including Judge Shlope and Public Protect Us Advocate Mkhobane. Shlope is facing impeachment, and Mkhobane may arguably hold the record for having more personal cost orders against her for a failure to understand the law, plus may be convicted for perjury to boot. Now, are you able to throw any light on how these two could conceivably have been recommended on any rational basis by the Pillay panel, which included Thuli Madonsela?
Aslam, I cannot comment on the people who were there and what they applied their minds to. So it will be only the panel and those individuals who made representations that fully know why they did what they did. But I can only surmise, from an outsider perspective, that sometimes when these decisions are made and they seem very wrong to us, because again, remember, these decisions are concerning because we have Judge Klope, who is tainted. You know, there's not unreproachable ethics. We have somebody who has misconducted themselves, etc. But what I think does happen is in these attempts and in these bodies, we try to get quite a wide, diverse range of people to sit there, and often with different political affiliations and leanings. And I think that's the issue at the end of the day. When individuals go into these committees and make decisions, they do have their affiliations, they do have their biases, they do have their views. And sometimes that may override or may take precedence over acts of misconduct. So I wouldn't know what one would have to look at the facts of what actually happened in the panel. But as an outsider looking in, I think when you go into this forum, you can't be guided by your political affiliations, you can't be guided by your personal biases. You have to go in there with a clear conscience, you have to be objective, and you have to do what's right for the country, irrespective if it might offend your political party or extra. It has to be about the bigger question of you have to do what's right for your country. And I think that's what each person should carry into these kind of committees.
Yeah, I think, look, obviously there's allegations against Shlope. The matters are still, he's challenging them. He hasn't been found guilty of anything yet. But the very fact that you've got allegations of this nature, it's problematic to appoint somebody with this cloud over them. Even the ANC, which is not even a judicial body, has a step-aside rule. And not to have a step-aside rule for a Chief Justice boggles rationality. We're going to take a break now and come back after the...
Why pay more when you get it all at Pick n Pay? Like 5 kilos Etosha 3 quarts, 2 for 100 rands when you swipe. And Russell Hobbs breakfast pack including stainless kettle and toaster for 899. Come in store to save even more with our incredible low price deals. Valid 2 to 9 March while stocks last. T's and C's apply. Only at Pick n Pay.
Radio Islam signed a code of conduct with the BCCSA. Under that code, we are committed to news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programs that are not harmful to children. Does not amount to hate speech, the description of gratuitous violence, or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to BCCSA, PO Box 412-365, Craig Hall 2024. Email bccsa@napsa.co.za. Please note our new address and telephone numbers. Block number 8, Burnside Island Office Park, 410 Jan Smuts Avenue, Craig Hall 2196. Telephone number 011-326-3130. Fax number 011-326-3197. For more information, visit bccsa.co.za.
The dedicated Radio Islam International team strives daily to provide you with ways in which to please your Rabb, your sustainer. This noble and pioneering effort requires your support. Donate now to cover the 11.5 million rand annual costs, with just a minimum of 100 rands a month and an annual 10% escalation. Contact Radio Islam at 011-854-7022 to contribute today, or download the debit form on radioislam.org.za/a/donate-generously.
Attention all traders, supermarkets and spazas. Visit Devlin Cash and Carry for all your deep cut specials on all listed groceries. Distributors of the widest range of household detergents and perishable goods. Open 7 days a week. Devlin Cash and Carry. Call 011 989 8800. Corner Klapkas and Person Road, Devlin.
Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam left a noble example of being eco-friendly and thus encouraged the believers, saying, if a Muslim plants a tree or sows seeds and then a bird or a person or an animal eats from it, it is regarded as a charitable gift, sadaqah, for him. Let us preserve nature's reserve. Radio Islam International.
Coming to you live from our Durban studios, this is Radio Islam International.
Assalamu alaikum to the listeners of Radio Islam International. If those of you who have just joined us, this is Aslam Mayat in conversation with Shamima Mayat, Fozia Madhi, who's an attorney, and her two children, Aqeel Madhi and Sabriyah Madhi. Sabriyah, if you can pose the next question to your mom.
Sure. So my next question is, what exactly was Ramaphosa's mandate to the JSC? Although the final decision is his, he cannot simply disregard the recommendation of Judge Maya, or can he? Has Ramaphosa boxed himself in?
Thank you, Sabriyah. This is quite an important question, and it has many facets to it. And the first thing that we have to deal with is, what was the actual mandate of the JSC? What were they supposed to do? How were they supposed to assist the president? So basically, they were not supposed to make a decision. Their role and responsibility was merely to guide the president on the suitability or eligibility of the candidates. So what they should have done is they should have looked at the candidates and then looked at their suitability and eligibility and provided the president with a report on the suitability of or the eligibility of the candidates. Thereafter, after having received this report and after the president would have consulted with the National Assembly, he then would be the person who would make a decision on who he should appoint as the Chief Justice. So basically, the Judicial Service Commission breached their mandate. They exceeded their mandate in that they didn't do that. They didn't only advise on the suitability and eligibility of the candidate. They actually made a decision. In their appointment of Justice Maya, they actually made a decision and they basically usurped the function of President Ramaphosa. So that puts him in a very, very difficult position. I think it's a precarious position that they've put him in, because he created a process, which is a correct one. I mean, under apartheid, the Chief Justice was decided by people sitting in a room and deciding without any public participation, without any process, a Chief Justice was appointed. And when apartheid was unraveled, we moved forward and decided to engender a better process where public participation is involved, and you have a creature of statutes such as the Judicial Services Commission that can assist and guide a president to make the right decision. But even now, we can see that sometimes even good intentions and a very public process can not go as it's intended to do, and that's really what happened. Is he boxed in? I think he's in a difficult situation, because by overstepping the mark and recommending Justice Maya, they've recommended a female candidate, and if she is appointed, she would be the first female Chief Justice, and there is a fair amount of support that she enjoys. So what does he do now? He has a Judicial Services Committee that has exceeded its mandate, but also has behaved unacceptably in the way the interviews were conducted, because there's no code of conduct, there was unacceptable questioning, line of questioning. The questioning was not consistent and fair. Some applicants got a softer line of questioning, others got a harder line of questioning. Very sensitive issues were raised without warning. So the whole interview process was also problematic, and they've exceeded their mandate. And the end result is we now have a female, if the candidates accepted, we have a potential female Chief Justice who enjoys support. Now, what does he do? If he was to reject a process that he put into place and not appoint the first potentially female justice, he is in a difficult situation and can engender criticism for that. At the same time, rightfully, he can and he should, under the circumstances of the way the interview went and the fact that the Judicial Service Commission has exceeded the mandate, he can then turn his back on that process and apply his own mind to it. But that also will engender criticism. So I think he's in a difficult situation, but I saw an interview where he said that being the president is just like that. You always get criticism whatever you do. So I think knowing that, here's hoping that now that he's found himself, he does make the right decision. We want a Chief Justice that's in the best interest of South Africa and take us forward as a country for such an important function. So we would like him to apply his mind and do the right thing. And going forward, obviously, we would like to have the code of conduct for the Judicial Service Commission not to allow problems like the exceeding of the mandate and the way the interview was conducted not to proceed again. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just amplify on that. Look, firstly, we need to have a Chief Justice appointed. It's overdue. After Chief Justice Mogoeng retired, there's a gap which needs to be filled. And, Ramaphosa mustn't carry on playing his long game. Whilst Fozia mentioned about exceeding the mandate, I think possibly they needed to give an explanation of their views on each of the four candidates. In the mandate given to them, they were also allowed to give a preference and a ranking of who they felt ought to be appointed. I think they went beyond just giving a ranking and just saying, this is our candidate. And I think that's where the problem does arise. The two candidates, Zondo is 1 year from retirement age. I think it's Mlambo, if I'm not mistaken, is 2 years from retirement age. So two of the judges are very close to retirement age. The other two, and look, they've all got their strengths. The one has a strength of being able to run a court professionally, bringing in technology and so on. But age really was a factor which had to be taken into consideration. Besides the Maya being a female, there's nothing wrong with her. I mean, she's a good candidate. So it's not that she's a bad candidate. She's an eminently suitable candidate. But as Fozia said, the manner in which the hearings were conducted were unfair and did not give everybody a proper chance to be assessed on. If I could pose a question, Parliament's Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interest found that Malema should not, I mentioned that earlier, should not have used the JSC as a platform for his personal interest, which related to a question of Judge Motonjane ruling he had given against the EFF in the Trevor Manuel defamation suit. Now, Malema is currently facing criminal charges. His defense is that he shot a toy gun and he said, "Kiss the Boer." How is it allowed for Malema or anybody else facing criminal charges and so on to be part of the selection of our judges? And why is the abuse that we mentioned earlier, hijacking, ambushing, being permitted on the JSC hearings? Again, Malema has not been found guilty. even bodies which are non-judicial have a step-aside rule. Are there no rules at all? Is it free for all? Fozia?
Yeah, I think, Aslam, we have this issue where we're not setting the standard. And I think there is a common thinking that only if you are found guilty in a court of law of a criminal matter or any matter, that's the only time that you should not be part of a committee, or you should not be chosen in a recruitment capacity as Chief Justice or any position. So I think the thinking is that if you haven't been found guilty, even though you've engaged in unacceptable behavior, then that's fine. And I think this is where standards, rules, and a code of conduct is important, because I think we need to start saying these things. I think we need a code of conduct that says that in the Judicial Service Committee, we cannot have a member to that committee if they if they've behaved unacceptably, even though a court has not convicted them. So we can set a standard there to say that if you, for example, make a statement, a very volatile statement, and a statement that can engender a lot of violence, like kiss the boer, that kind of behavior, we can identify that behavior as unacceptable, and that disqualifies you from the Judicial Services Committee, notwithstanding the fact that you may not have been found guilty in a court of law or your matter is still pending. So I think this...
Fozia, I'm not sure if kiss the boer can be regarded as endangering or inciting violent conduct.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Okay. Aqeel, you had a question to ask?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of, not necessary questions posed to the members of the thing, but the JSC, they've been acting up for a while, and one of those examples is one of the members of the JSC, Advocate Dali Mpofu, at the Zondo Commission, told a female attorney to shut up, and he may now face disciplinary charges for this. What is your view on this, Fozia?
Yeah, I think sometimes, you see, we focus on the race aspect of it, but if we leave the race aspect about it, it is totally unacceptable for anybody, including Dali Mpofu, to use language like that to anybody. So let's start about it. It's unacceptable for anybody to, in a proceeding as a Zondo Commission, to behave in that matter, to tell somebody to shut up. And obviously in South Africa, we do tend to then classify that in terms of color. But the point remains for me is that there's acceptable behavior and there's unacceptable behavior, and nobody should engage in unacceptable behavior. Nobody should be rude and aggressive or tell another person to shut up. And I think that people of the legal profession, I mean, that's a learned profession, it's a respectable profession, it's a profession of very high integrity and standards and ethics. It engenders very people with conscience and who are trying to right wrongs, and I think it's totally unacceptable for a member of that profession to behave in that way.
Okay. We've run out of time, so we were going to just touch on the whistleblowers, but we have dealt with it on a previous occasion. So firstly, I would like to thank the guests who've come here, principally Fozia Madhi, who's given us her expert legal opinion. As I said, she's on the Exco of Active Citizens Movement. I'd also like to thank Sabriyah and Aqeel Madhi. I think when they get home, Mum Fozia is going to scold them for putting her in the dock with some very tough questions. And of course, we've got to thank Radio Islam for having community interest programs, and shukran to the Techno Fundis, Hussein Umar in the Durban studio, and Ziad Mutli in Johannesburg, who all, they've run this thing so well that it makes life very easy for us. And look, least I forget, I think I'd better thank my rock and my wings, Shamima Mayat. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.